Hello and welcome to the Power of Integrity podcast, where leadership aligns with principles. I'm Ralph Adamo, and today I'm delighted to have on our show Charles Antis, a good friend, a client of our firm in full disclosure, and also a wonderful philanthropist for Orange County and beyond the borders of Orange County. Charles, welcome aboard, and thank you for joining us today. Our audience would love to learn a little bit more about you. For those that don't know you already, they're in for a real thrill. Would you tell a little bit about your journey that's led you here today, professionally and personally, and how integrity's played a role in that journey?
Yes, thank you, Ralph. And my journey to be here is very personal with you. I know you. I was telling Bobby about the time you logged in that I believe it was about 16 years ago, 15 years ago, on a leaders build day committee I served on. You were there, and I think that's where we met. And then in Vistage, and we were both curious minded. I would say people that were very curious CEOs that always thought that maybe we could listen and find a better way. And we had that in common, and that's why we know each other, and that's why we're connected. The service, but how I got to who I am, a roofing contractor that donates roofs to Habitat for Humanity. How I got there, a laborer. How I got there was growing up in the mountains of Oregon. Like, I'm 62, so my earliest memories were in the 60s, like 1968, growing up, and I just had this image of men and what men do. And men did two things. If you lived in Myrtle Creek, Oregon, in the mountains with all those firs, you either cut them or you timbered them. So you were either up on the logging camps cutting them down, or you were in the lumber mills or plywood mills turning them into product. And it was a thriving economy, but it was a dangerous job. So work to me was dangerous. That was part of my childhood. But it is worth mentioning, there was one man that I remember I never knew personally. I only saw him like once or twice a year. And his name was John Shirtcliffe. And he was the only man that I remember that I noticed that didn't work in the logging camps or in the plywood mills. And he had a business. And at the end of the Wooden Nickel Days parade, the biggest event in town that everybody went to, the floats, and he would be like at the end of the parade and he'd be passing out dimes. And I remember what it meant to me when I was 6 or 7 years old to go out and get that dime from Mr. Shirtcliffe that I could buy 2 of my favorite candy bars with. But it was something else that Mr. Shirtcliffe did when he gave me that dime. It was as if he grabbed me by the shoulders and said, "Hey, Charlie, look at you. Look at you." And something stirred in me that I couldn't recognize at that time. But sometime in my life, looking back, I realized that I wanted to do what he did. But all I knew was I was a laborer. So I got to fast forward to coming to Southern California when I'm 21, 22 years old. and I end up looking for work. I came to California because I had a job as a salesman. This is before I was looking for work. I had a job as a salesman and I loved it. I'm finally out of the small mountain town. I'm finally in LA, which is something I always wanted to do. But I was knocking on doors, selling insulation, and it was a company that was taking advantage of a rebate program with SoCal Edison. And so we knock on doors and we promise people savings on their energy. And I remember I was doing okay. I was kind of learning to sell. I didn't have to work that hard. And I sold this family this day. And I remember this family, and you're in sales. When you sell somebody, you don't want to sell who you don't love to. You want to love the people you sell to. And I remember this family, like all the people I sold to that summer, insulation to, they were my favorite. And I remember them because they were deaf or hard of hearing, the mom and dad, and the kids were just about 12. These 2 girls, they were bouncing around the house. We had the funnest day. And then the next day I went back to pick up the check. And I remember I knocked on the door and nobody answered. And well, they're deaf, they didn't hear. I knocked on the door, nobody answers. I look through the little glass and I see him, and I think he sees me, but he's on that phone tap machine, that TDD machine. And suddenly I hear footsteps and I turn around and there's a woman like charging me. She's really small, but she's mighty. She's coming at me and she's like, you get out of here. She's shooing me off the porch like I'm a bad guy. And I go, no, I'm their friend. And they go, "No, you're not." I go, I know I have this contract. And then she pulled out the copy she had now. And she goes, "No, I have it here. And you're taking advantage of my handicapped neighbors." And I was humidified that I couldn't see that family that I thought I was serving. And instead, I was shooed off the porch, never to even hold their stare, by this woman who saw me as a villain. And at some point, I realized that I was in no position to argue. I studied the contract looking at it after I was shooed away and realized what that lady was saying is that family was going to spend more money than they were going to save because they only had a $35 a month bill. And it was not something we were taught to know. And I'm not taking that excuse off my shoulders, but I wasn't taught integrity. I wasn't taught any morality in my business dealings when I was taught to go sell people. But on that day, I learned something, and I looked for a job. And here I am in Southern California, living in probably Granada Hills. And I'm looking for work, and I look for work with labor. That's the only thing that comes to mind. And the only job I heard about was roofing. I called the guy, he goes, I don't have work, but this guy does. And he lived in Torrance, California. His name was Tim Curtis. And I think he's still in the roofing business. And he was my first roofing mentor. And he hired me. And I found it really difficult work. It was the hardest work I'd ever done. Dusty, dirty, dangerous. But it didn't feel dangerous, again, because I was raised with doing dangerous work. It's what men do. But there was something that happened there that was really powerful for me. And that was, I was up on the roof, and he challenged me one day to solve a leak. And this woman has a leak in her house, and can you go solve it? And to me, that was like I'm Inspector Clouseau. I'm going to go solve a clue. Give me the clue. And I wasn't going to do labor. I was going to go use my brain. And so I went over there, and I started taking things apart. And where all this roofing came together, there was this coping metal. And coping it means a term that separates two sections of something. And these two sections of roof had coping metal in between it with this little rise. And so I took it apart, and I found water got through, and I could see the trail. I took pictures. I put it all back together, and I was so proud. And the next day, Tim Curtis comes back up on the roof with me again, and he asked Charles, did you do that repair? And I very proudly said, yes, Tim. And I walked him over with kind of puffing my chest, and I pointed to it. And he sort of squared his shoulders and said, kind of giggled and said, yeah, that's going to leak again. I remember that stung. It stung bad. And I wanted to argue, and I did argue. I said, well, what do you mean? I saw it. I sealed it. It won't leak again. And then Tim taught me the first story or principle in roofing that I'll never forget. He said, Charles, you put the coping metal on backwards. You put the top one on first and the bottom one on. Water was eventually going to work its way through and leak again. And then he said, roofing components and wall and flashing components must work exactly like feathers on a duck's back. A duck's back never gets wet because feathers above overlap feathers below. And the same is true with the components of a roof or wall. Everything above overlaps everything below. And it's so simple, that beautiful metaphor. And by taking that moment of embarrassment and also that huge intention to never, ever miss a leak again, I decided that this was my thing. I want to solve leaks. And I remember turning into this leak sleuth where Tim would send me out on sometimes 10 leaks in a day. And I would go up and knock them out. I remember I was so proud that I could solve all those families' leaks and then make that money for this company. It felt really good. And that was a powerful experience that really made me love what we do in roofing. But the real challenge came was when I needed more work for my own family. And because Tim had some other things going, he was slowing down. And I didn't have any marketing experience. I didn't know what marketing was. I didn't understand the difference between marketing and sales. I was just desperate to solve leaks. So I came up with a catchphrase, and I said it to property managers because I had worked with Tim solving leaks on condos. And so property managers, they manage condos. So I said to the property managers, give me the leak that no one can solve, and I'll fix it for free. And that worked pretty good because I got a few leaks. But I remember right into that, I got a call from a property manager who managed a property in Redondo Beach. And I was excited to solve that leak. But on the way out there, driving out there, I realized, oh my God, it's not like a 2-story sloped roof. It's an 8-story flat condo. And there was a leak on the outside wall for 20 years leaking into the bathroom. I think she probably laughed when she pitched this to me. You want to solve a leak no one can solve? Here, give this one. Family's not even living there anymore. So I go out to this place and I don't have a ladder tall enough, so I go back the next day with a bosun's chair. I didn't want to use a bosun's chair, and a bosun's chair, it sounds funky, and it is. And if you've ever been on a cruise and you've seen the sailors over the side painting or washing the windows, hanging on that little tiny bench with 2 ropes on the side, that's a bosun's chair. And I was hanging on the side over this 8-story roof 2 days later, thinking, oh my God, what did I get myself into? What was I thinking when I said, give me the leak, that nobody could solve? Because there I was dangling on a cord. I had like 6 tethers, and I had 6 pieces of siding I'd cut off, all dangling on these clamps and tethers. And I had 1 tether left open. My Makita saw clipped on. I pulled it. I cut that last piece, again, feeling so low. And then I looked down and saw this tiny speck, and I didn't know what it was, but I started picking at it. I clipped off that last piece of wood, and I picked more, and this old paper came up, and I saw this kind of a drywall, not even drywall, plaster. And then behind that, this wet, rusty, ancient square-headed nail. I mean, I say ancient because it was square-headed. We don't build with those anymore. It was original construction going through that original pipe. It wasn't even from the roof, but nobody had found it until that moment. And I think for me, that was a moment when I knew, I went from this, talk about a switch of emotion. 30 seconds before, I'm literally wondering if I'm going to survive and support my family. And then, 1 minute later, I'm like King Kong up on top of that building. And it was a big moment. And I think I'll always remember that power of, this thing that I learned when I was still working for Tim, when I really needed to solve a leak. I would literally go up on a roof with this big intention, that desperateness to solve the family's leak. And I don't know why it's so big in me, but there is a thing that when you show up, you got to do it right, that my father taught me. And I would literally lay down until my head hit the tiles where nobody could see. And I would imagine I am a drop of water. I would imagine myself as water falling, hitting the chimney, clinging, falling, pulling, pooling under the flashing. And somehow by going through that step by step, almost spiritual, but might sound silly to some. I never shared it till a couple of years ago. But by going through that, I always found the leak. Whether popped the tile up 2 feet away or 20 foot away, we found the rusty nail penetrating the paper that would be leaking. And there was something really powerful in learning how to do the best of my trade. And that's not always selling somebody a new roof. It's solving the leak so they get 10 more years out of the roof they're in. That does right by the people. It also does right by the environment, where 23% of our landfills in the U.S. are filled with roofing product, much of it pulled off prematurely. And so I started to have these moments. And I'm going to tell you one more story, because it doesn't make sense if I don't tell you this story, how we met. And that is, during that first year, things were tight. Things were so tight that when I was so desperate for the couple of calls I'd get a week, I turned my home office, it was a converted bedroom, I put weather stripping around that door so if somebody called, they wouldn't hear the kids. And under that kind of pressure, I remember I got a call and a lady had leaks. And I was excited. She had multiple leaks. So I was driving out the next day to look at these leaks, and I noticed I was moving toward her area where she lived, which was toward LAX. I noticed that the homes were getting more disheveled. I saw some graffiti, and I was starting to get a lump in my throat, like, oh no, this isn't what I thought. This may not be a money-making opportunity for me after all. And suddenly I turn on the home where the street's going to be, and I don't even see a home at first. I keep driving. I see set back a tiny little square home with dead grass all around it, and like a crooked letter like 107 and the 7's off. And I'm like, gosh, do I knock? But my dad told me to work hard. You always show up, always do the right thing. So I knocked on the door, and then these 3 things happen really fast. A woman answers, but she's not smiling. I start to wonder how I'm going to respond. And then I get this smell of mildew that's so strong it nearly knocks me down. I'm allergic, and now I'm thinking what I'm going to say when I'm going to leave. But as I'm about to still utter my first word, I feel a tug on my hand, and I look down, and in contrast to the frown on her mom's face and the fear in my face, she's this little girl, this smiley little 6-year-old with this huge grin, pulling my hand through her house. in through this crooked hallway into her room. And I knew it was her room because right away she points to this new My Little Pony poster that she was obviously proud of. But that was the moment that I have this snapshot in my head still to this day where I saw her feet by the moldy mattress where she slept. It didn't even hit me till years later, it being so personal, that's where the smell of the mold was coming from. It was just so much to bear. I just stood there in shock. I didn't move. The girl kept smiling. I don't know if I was smiling. I might have been feigning a smile, but after it seemed like 30 seconds, the mom walked in again with the same frown. And that, like, she'd never expected to hear good news in her life. Like, she's never heard good news. And something came up in me that I don't ever remember saying before, but in that moment, it came up big. And I said, I'm going to take care of your roof. And then I was wondering, what did you just say? I was like, there's another side of my brain. What did you say? And I go up on the roof thinking, please just be a hole in the roof. But instead, like that old roofing commercial that used to hear on KFI, they needed a whole new roof. But something happened then. I had to reach down. I had to get on the phone and get a bunch of volunteers. And I went and got some simple roofing product. But we gave that family a safe, dry roof that weekend, and they stayed in that home. And that ended up being the story that propelled me, not telling it for years, but something amazing happened. Those that were involved, whenever we saw each other, it's like a high five and a hug. Sometimes people high fiving and hugging that don't high five and hug. It's powerful. There's a moment that you remember when people come together to do good. It's really how we are meant to be if we're whole. We are meant, and that's what I learned in roofing. And so that made no sense how it didn't eventually turn into us donating all of the roofs for Habitat for Humanity, all of the roofs for Ronald McDonald House, pushing the initiative across the country. So all of the roofs and all of the Ronald McDonald houses are adopted by roofing professionals like us who are involved, lifting the trades, the wonderful thing that we do, keeping families safe and dry, but also using that great skill to benefit the community, just like a doctor would do on a doctor with integrity would do on an airplane, which I've been honored to witness. That was my doctor on an airplane moment in that little girl's house. And eventually telling that story and living that same principle in our lives at work and in our principles at work, and pushing it with people to be real with their real stories and their real lives instead of just, my fruit basket. No, let's help that cancer kinship that helped your aunt when she was sick, that told her how nutrition was going to save her. Let's tell those stories. And so it's been a beautiful journey to get where we've gotten today, learning to chase impact instead of growth. And you've been right there, Ralph, for the last 15 years since I started really understanding what cause is and how to implement it in our business. So thanks for letting me go on that way longer than I promised rant.
Yeah, well, no apologies for the time you took at all, because what you shared was powerful. I was captivated and I was inspired. It reminds me of a story I tell often about my own trade and profession. I try to talk to my fellow advisors as you probably talk to your fellow professionals that are roofing. There's this wonderful story about the bricklayer, and the bricklayer is being asked, are you laying brick? Are you building a wall? Or are you erecting a cathedral? What are you really doing here? Because their activities are all the same. But what's the purpose and the intention in the end? And that just came echoing through every one of your conversations there. It wasn't about just fixing leaks. It was about making families safe, secure, and dry.
It's funny that we didn't come up with that line till about, I would say 8 years ago, working really hard to crunch our marketing message. It became so clear it couldn't be better. That is our why. And it works with any question with any of us. We love that mission, and it's loved in our industry of keeping families safe and dry. And it works for us, and so thank you. But it took so long. It's so simple when you get it, the just do it. It seemed, Nike, that's so easy. that, and yet it's so awesome when you really break down what your deepest intentions could be if you could pause and live at your highest.
Yes. Yes. Yep. Sometimes going down deep also brings us elevated for sure.
Which you love to do.
Yeah, thank you. So, Charles, tell me, can you give our audience an example how prioritizing integrity has benefited your business specifically, your leadership style? What examples can you give to our audience in addition to the few you've already shared?
Yeah, I like that question. I think integrity is it's a great word, a great purposeful word to put out there because it means a lot to a lot of people. At first, when I think about what it teaches me, it's what my father taught me at the earliest age. I can never remember my dad cheating anything. He would never walk out of a restaurant with a cup or things that other people might not think 2 seconds about. He's very honorable. And my dad would just always expect me, whether in words or the way he held my stare, is you show up no matter what. If you're going to be there, you're going to be there. And there was this quiet, sometimes nudge, sometimes said, "Son, always do the right thing." And it's really powerful in me. So I'm not claiming I always did the right thing. I remember not doing the right thing and lying about it as a kid. I remember then when I stole a candy bar at the Super Y Market, and I remember when I had to look at my dad after that, after I was caught by Bobby Wilson, the store manager, that my dad used to work for, and when he was in high school. I can't believe that's making me get teary-eyed right now, but that hurt. I think it is because my father has some dementia right now, and I love that my dad, who set a high example for me, and right now I'm helping him. I'm going to pick him up in a few hours and take him to my kids' talent school at their at their grade school today. They're having a talent show, and Charlie's doing yo-yo tricks, and Gracie's got a little skit. She's spooky stories.
These are Charles's twins. Yes,
Yes.
you can share a little bit about them if you'd like, Charles.
So this is my life though, and let me really say how that matters. My business is the same. You're going to see me talk the same at home and at work, and they do mix. I'm on the Ronald McDonald House board. I was for so many years because my kids were born premature, and everybody knows that inside and outside. But the principles are really powerful that you're hitting on because integrity has a lot of meanings to a lot of people. But one of the beautiful things that you can do with the word is look at the root. And the root of integrity is Latin, and it comes from the word whole. I'm not going to tell you what the Latin word is, but it comes from the word whole. And there's something that I know today that it took me a long time to learn. We are whole when we're not whole if we have something and that person right there doesn't. We're not whole. Once we realize we can only be whole by bringing everybody in and continually widening our gaze and our sphere, I think that's the power in leadership. So today, like I would in the old days, it would be easy for me to work people 100 hours a week. Now that sounds improbable, and maybe it is, because I just remember this one week, Aaron, who really drives Antis Roofing. He's our VP of sales and a lot more. Aaron was working and going to school, and during his off time at school, he worked 98 and a half hours one week. He logged in, and I was a tiny bit disappointed he didn't hit 100. Now that just sounds incredible that I would actually have that feeling, but there was a sense that I would be the first one there, the last one to leave, and I was a workaholic for a lot of years, and that was not a balance. I was not whole. I wasn't helping others be whole. When I didn't have an HR department, sometimes letting go people was messy, and I feel bad for some of that, but I wasn't whole yet. Being whole means not only taking care of community, but it also means taking care of your people, which is sometimes more scary because, people, once you take care of your employees, they're going to expect to be taken care of. But what if you could? What if you could imagine that they were family? And there's something powerful about building big intentions and exceeding generosity with people. We have an expression that we err on the side of generosity with all of our stakeholders. It's one of those equations that doesn't make sense with math, but the more we give, the more we have. And so internally, we try to make sure we lift everybody, give them all the training, EQ training. If you're born in a Latin American country, we're going to have you trained by a company that are people born from Latin American countries. We're really going deep to see what will lift you, to see what fulfills you. We'll donate to what if it's not Ronald McDonald House or Habitat for Humanity or Team Kids or Little League, which is my new thing that we're also doing, Little League. My slogan is for Little League, and you're going to love it. I guarantee you're going to love it if you've been to a Little League game. As a parent, as a coach, as enough, 2 words: be kind. Integrity. I'm sorry. I could rant on it for a long time, but it's everything we live by. I wish I could have just hung my hat on those principles my dad gave me sooner. But it's like investment. It's like a long-term investment every time. But when you've been betting this way for a long time, doing the right thing, wow, you get confidence. Wow, your brand soars. And it's a really beautiful thing. And we get to experience that. And I feel like the luckiest CEO. I call myself often the luckiest CEO in NOC.
I love what you said about erring on the side of generosity. What a powerful way to live and to think, for sure. And your father would love the notion, integrity boils down for me to 3 basic things. Do what you say you're going to do, finish what you start, and do the right thing, even when no one's looking.
I've heard Dad say all those things.
Right? I think your father, your father encapsulated and lived those things out loud, for sure. How does integrity influence your workforce, your leadership style with integrity? What do you think it does for performance and for even profitability? Let's not hide from that.
Yeah, well, I want to first talk about staffing. We're in the roofing industry. It's not where first glance where people on top talent and with different trade or different skills. The roofing industry in California is not where people often set their sights. In fact, I used to associate myself, I would giggle, not knowing I was making fun of myself, really. I would giggle and tell people, yeah, it's like the 1,000th, it's right there above ditch digging as job satisfaction. I used to hold it that way. But something shifted, again, once we found our why and once we realized how beautiful our trade was, how old this trade is, old as time, and how when you're good at it, you can really keep a family safe and dry. What happens is when you get that message out, sometimes it's by donating that habitat roof. Sometimes it's by how somebody is treated inside the company they hear, but you start to attract that top talent. And I could mention a couple people. One is the person that's helping me in the studio today. I mean, on his resume, he was trained in the art of visual storytelling. And now any half-decent marketing department would put that right there at the top of the resume. I knew this guy was great. And it was always like proof. When our brand got purposeful and people knew it, would we attract top talent? Ask anybody in the nonprofit world in Orange County and beyond, and they know who Bobby is. Bobby Pazinski, some call him Click, Click, Click. I call him Babarazzi. He lifts. He's like me, but he has the arts and skills, the ninja warfare, to be able to turn everything into a moment that can lift more people, And he does it from his seat. If you look at our COO, Bobby would tell you the same thing if he was on this side of the mic, that Susan DeGrassi is one of the greatest leaders we've ever seen. And she leads with positivity. Our HR is full of love. And she there's something that I would like to say about her that's really beautiful, because you and I were in Vistage meetings together, and we both heard that thing a dozen years ago. When you get rid of that person in the office that everyone knows isn't doing much work, it actually improves all the morale because everyone knows that person should have been gone anyway. There is some truth to that. I'm not saying that couldn't be true, but let me give you a greater equation. Susan's investment is, what if I can take that person and make them happy here and find the area where they could be the most productive? And I think that is a beautiful scenario that she will always lead with that. And so everyone knows they have a best friend, and that's our COO who oversees everything with love. That's Susan DeGrassi. But then if you look in our field, Aaron, I mentioned him earlier. I mean, Corey, who runs all of our giving right now. Okay, there's an example. Aaron and Corey are what the brand doesn't only bring them in, but it develops. I take no credit in developing this. It's the nonprofit alliances that we have along with the leaders it builds. I mean, I take a small role, but we're able to really build this. And then we're able to live with these principles. You want to talk about a return? I'll give you the greatest return. You remember that other thing we learned in Vistage a dozen years ago? Every time you have to replace an employee, you don't realize it, but it's going to cost you like 50 grand. That's the number back then. Okay. You know what the attrition rate is in the roofing industry across the nation? 56%. Go out on any job site you see up there, half those roofers won't be with that company the next day. How are all those 200,000 parts going to go in the right spot perfectly? That's not going to be me up there laying down on the roof solving it 20 years later. I wish I could still do that. So there's what happens is in Antis Roofing, we have a 92% retention rate. It's like literally twice the national average of retention. What that does to how we feel about ourselves, we really do carry it. When you watch our men and women up on the roofs, there's a swagger to them. They're proud. The Lobo eyes that are on their shoulder, that means you do the right thing. We love to compare traits to the Mexican white wolf, of only which there's 100 left in the world. It's a good luck sign when you see white wolf, but those eyes over, to look for safety. We have meaning in everything that we do, and our rooferos are proud, and it feels good. When people honk at them and wave at them as a thank you, and it's kind of exciting that this builds all the way through. And then we provide opportunities for them. We provide, I was hearing at a meeting yesterday, the roofing industry that we compete against, they don't provide vacation time. We provide full vacation time. We invest in them. We invest in them. We push the 401k. We teach them what that is and why they should do it. And then we'll match up to, I think we can match up to 4%. And we full match it. And so once you start doing this, it becomes so powerful. Your roofing company becomes a family company. I do have some family in my company, but now we literally are a family. Susan's like the mom sometimes. Literally, I'm out with Susan and Corey. Sometimes people talk to us like Bobby and Corey are Susan and my kids, and then we just giggle at it. It's funny. But we have become so close. We're like family, and the company thrives in every sense of the term. In every sense of the term, we're thriving. We're doing better than we've ever done financially, and we're being as generous as we've ever been. And how does that all work? Well, I have a lot more stories that I'll tell a lot more of soon. But this is just, I don't know. The more, we always find this, any kind of inconvenience or short-term pain from giving is always greatly flooded out by these long-term winds and ripples that keep coming forever. And so we just remember that. And every time I have to remind people all the time, because Susan DeGrassi used to be overcautious. She was the one giving. Now that she's COO, she's sometimes saying, Corey and Charles, you can't do this. Susan, remember, this is how it works. It's supposed to hurt, and it's such a beautiful discussion that we have, because I don't know, man, every time we reach down deep and every time we pause and we make that sacrifice, it really defines who we are, and it lifts who we are, and people notice who we are and remember who we are. And that matters for everyone.
Yeah, Charles, you remind me, I used to take my son into Athletic Republic for just sports training and different agility coordination classes and sessions. And there was a wonderful sign over the door before you entered the gym. It says, today I do what others won't. Tomorrow I do what others can't. And it seems like those short-term pains are worth the long-term wins, because you end up compounding and doing what others can't as a result of not doing what others won't in the interim. Yeah.
I agree.
Powerful stuff. Charles, tell our audience a time where you encountered, probably on the other side of the equation, where integrity was lacking and how it collapsed, maybe the transaction, the deal, the relationship, and kind of turn integrity on its head for a moment and tell us the opposite side of how you've seen the lack of it not work.
Well, it'd be easy for me to look at the HOA industry and say, there's sometimes a lack of integrity here, and really what focuses, but it's not fair for me to do that. That's just because it's so personal to me that the people that I sell to, it's really personal to me. It's the most important terrarium I know, but really, I can't really point the finger at other companies. For me, there's no integrity in that. But I can
Well,
laugh
no,
at myself.
not without breaching the confidence of anything, any particular industry.
I know I
Just
feel like if I say any kind of story, that people are going to figure it out. So let me talk about me. I could say our growth is more important. It's like,
yeah,
what I didn't know. I had mentioned all the hours I'd worked before, but there was a lot that I remember a long time ago when you're starting my company, and I remember Dad's words ringing in my head, "Do the right thing." And I remember going to Home Depot and I got all this stuff, which I did a lot, and I got home and I realized they didn't charge me for something, and it might have been a small ladder. It was like $50, and I was sure they didn't charge me. I thought, oh, well, that all works out because I get overcharged. And I remember thinking that. I remember thinking about that damn ladder for years. It might have been a few months, but I think it was a few years that rotted in me, maybe 10 years. Finally, I just wrote an anonymous check and I sent it to Home Depot for the ladder that I didn't think I paid for all those years ago. So I think that it's funny how little things matter. Doing right by yourself really matters. We all have that moment we remember when we thought we could change the world. And a lot of times we compromise. We don't realize we can go back to it at any moment. But you have to be willing to laugh at yourself, even what you just said. And one of the greatest things that you need, that you have, that I know you have, and you'll get this, it took me a long time to let go of knowing the answers. And becoming a master of not knowing is a really beautiful thing, which means I'm always listening. I'll always have an opinion, by the way, but the moment I release it and you come up with a better plan, something shifted in me a few years ago that I don't need to hang on to being right anymore. I can actually have fun with it because I realize I'm creating discussion and it's beautiful no matter what happens. And no longer does my ego need that. Oh, it starts to, but I can giggle at myself and in the moment catch it. And I think there's and again, if you want a great skill of integrity, if you want to be a great leader, if you're a CEO, then if you learn to not know, everything rises. And the greatest story, I'll tell it in 1 minute. It's a 1,500-year-old true story. It happened on another continent. A man named Panwan was going on his pilgrimage to find himself. And on his journey, as luck would have it, he runs into the most enlightened one of all. He was on the side of the road and he sees him, and Panwan's all excited. He's going to walk by them. As he walks by, the enlightened master says, "Where are you going?" Panwan straightened himself and says, "I am on my pilgrimage." And at that moment, the master turned his head and said, "What is pilgrimage?" Panwan froze. It's like this was the moment he'd waited for, to discover this moment. And here he is with the one that could help him see it. Instead, he bowed his head in disgrace and says, "I don't know." And the master said, nodding his head, not knowing is closest to enlightenment. I thought, that's a beautiful story today for me, because I fought so long to know, thinking I was always wrong, weighting myself down. I still do it, but I allow myself to let off the weights and just not know the answer and show up like I did today. I was, oh my God, what's his integrity? Oh my God, I got to go these questions right. No, I just got to show up and be real with who's here today in this particular audience, with Ralph Adamo, who I've known for 15 years, and I met through giving and always wondering how to do good things, how to make ourselves healthier, how to live longer. I mean, look at the conversations we have. So this right here is a unique opportunity, and I'm able to pause in the moment and see it that way. And I find that just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, Charles, soon behind the concept of integrity comes the word authenticity. And I think that's what you're hinting at, and that's what you're embodying today, is you brought your authentic self. And that's all, as I think it was Walt Whitman said, essentially, come as you are, that is enough.
I like that.
Yeah, come as you are, that is enough. Well, we've got to land this plane pretty soon. So in thinking about that, Charles, would you tell our younger audience, like, you've given them so many golden nuggets, but if you're speaking to a younger audience that's starting in their career, starting in their lives, what would you tell them?
Thank you for helping me look through that lens. First of all, look at you. Look at you. Look at you. You're sitting here in this moment thinking about your life. It took me a while to get there. I'm saying, look at you. You're young. If you want to be happy, it's simple. Do what you love. So you have to find out who you are. So you better do DISC assessments, do some EQ, find out who you are. They're real simple, real cheap, do it, and find the truth in it and giggle at yourself. So like I used to always be embarrassed. I wanted to be the center of attention until I did a DISC assessment and said I was a high I. Immediately I forgave myself. Oh, I'm built that way. I'm just good at it now. I leverage it better instead of hiding from it. Find out who you are. And then something magic happens when you give away what you have, as I explained today. It's like the whole blessings your church tells you is true. It's like the whole karma thing is true. To me, it doesn't matter by how it works. My experience is clutch it, it sifts. Let it go, and it comes. And do that in business, and it works. I forgot what I was answering. I got off on a whole other thing. Young people. So really what you have to do is find what you love. And so make your real life. You talked about authenticity. You have to show your authenticity. The USC badge doesn't mean what it used to mean to other people. They need to know your story. And if your story is going to be believed, then you have to show some vulnerability. The right amount of vulnerability will happen if you talk about the cause that fulfills you. It could be Ronald McDonald House. You could have had a niece that was sick, whose family was kept close, and you went through the house that day to see them. It could be whatever. It could be anything, any cause. But if you can tell that story, if you tell that story at your job interview, you'll be hired. It's the weirdest thing. When it's real, it's just like, that's the person I want. I want the person who matches our goodness integrity platform, not the person who's most skilled. You'll be loved, you'll fit in, you'll be able to be heard inside and outside the company. And then if you have that, once you start volunteering, and I always say, if you're young and you're a professional, find the way to volunteer. Join the committee like we did at Habitat, or wherever that place is that you love. And then it made sense that I would eventually be called to the board once you stay in that spot if you're a professional. And, I don't have to donate the roofs to be in that board, by the way. That's just something we're able to do because we have great partners in the roofing industry like Eagle Tile, excuse me, who's donated every tile on all 99 roofs we've committed, except for the couple done by GF Shingles, because some of them are called for shingles. My point is it sets you in a line to know everybody, and something happens when you go sit in that board meeting, as you well know, Ralph, or in that committee meeting. You become who you hang around. You are the equivalent of the people you hang around, and so it's so weird. You become those people that you look up to. And next thing you know, you get to help other people do what they did for you. And it's a beautiful thing. Serve in that moment, and you'll giggle like a kid. And I don't know what's greater than giggling like a kid.
Well, yeah, my takeaways there is servitude's critical. Have a cause in your life, and be cautious who you hang out with. Surround yourself with people that you admire, that you respect, and that you want to be like. And believe it or not, they'll drag you to that elevation or take you down to the depths of the problems. So depending on who you surround yourself with is critical for sure. That's Charles, you've hit so many wonderful spots today. People are going to want to get in touch with you. Probably of all our guests to date, you have inspired folks the most with your storytelling. You've got an uncanny knack to be able to tell a story and keep an audience captivated. I know I've been captivated through the whole conversation. And this conversation's gone longer than most of our podcast conversations, and I wish we had double the time to continue. But as we kind of land this one, if folks want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
I'm on LinkedIn. I post most every day. And usually it's about something really cool, or it's about self-care, like how I put my hand in a tree sometimes just to ground myself. It's whatever, but it's about real stuff. There's definitely some vulnerability. So LinkedIn, Charles Antis on LinkedIn. Charles Antis, there's only one of us, I think, on there. It's a pretty unique name, Antis. And then we're very, very social on the other platforms at Antis Roofing. I'm very available if you want to get a hold of me in another way, you can reach out through our people on social media. And if there's appropriate, we'll give other stuff. Sometimes my marketing people says, don't give them all your personal phone and everything. So sometimes I would, like, here's all my credit cards too. What else do you want?
Yeah. Yes. Error on the side of generosity. I'm going to go away with that today.
They protect me, though.
Charles Antis, you've been a wonderful guest for the Power of Integrity podcast, where leadership aligns with principles. You certainly embody that, and what a delightful conversation. I really appreciate you, my friend. I love you much.
Love
and
you.
I know our audience loves you as well now.
The information presented in this program is provided for informational purposes only. The information is believed to be reliable, but no guarantee of accuracy is made or implied. Expressions of opinions are as of this date and are subject to change without notice. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult a legal or tax professional for specific information regarding your individual situation. This information does not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security. Investing involves risks, including possible loss of capital. Ralph Adamo is registered with the securities and are offered through Kovac Securities, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC, 6451 North Federal Highway, Suite 1201, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33308. Telephone number 954-782-4771. Investment advisory services are offered through Kovac Advisors, Inc. Integrity Wealth Management is not affiliated with Kovac Securities, Inc. or Kovac Advisors, Inc.